Order, please. Order. Late debate was chosen earlier, and late debate tonight will be, therefore be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly recognize and congratulate this government for honouring its commitment to making life better for families in Nova Scotia. Submitted by the member for Pictou East. Before we begin today, I would like to revisit a point of order I mentioned yesterday after question period. In debate, which includes question period, members are not to refer to other members as you or use your in reference to other members. For example, a question should ask the minister about his decision. It should not be phrased so as to ask you about your decision. This is basic parliamentary courtesy, and it will be upheld in this chamber. All comments and questions directed to other members are to be addressed to the chair and should be phrased in the third person. I'm going to have the chief clerk prepare and circulate a procedure note on this to the House leaders and deputy House leaders so that all members would be able to have an explanation of the proper parliamentary procedure. In the meantime, I suggest that any members who have prepared questions for today's question period go through them looking for the use of the words you and your, so that we can change them before we arrive at question period. Thank you for your attention in this matter. Presenting and reading of petitions. Presenting reports of committees. Tabling reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I begin my statement, may I make an introduction?
Most certainly.
Thank you. I'd like to bring everyone's attention to the gallery, and here today we have Dr. LeBlanc from the IWK Health Centre, and he is a pediatrician and researcher at Dalhousie Medical School. Alexis Allen, President of the Nova Scotia Teachers Union. I don't see one of our guests here today. And Vic Fleury, President of the Nova Scotia School Board Association. Ken Meach, Executive Director of the Nova Scotia School Board Association. Natalie Aucoin, Executive Director, Fédération de Parents Acadiens de la Nouvelle-Écosse. Megan McDonald from the Canadian Mental Health Association Nova Scotia Division. Rola Habahana, Guidance Consultant Student Services Division at the Department of Education. And Julian Young, Coordinator of Injury Prevention and Control, Health and Wellness. These are just a few of the many partners involved in the continuing effort to fight bullying in schools and when children are at home on their computers. And I would like to thank all of our partners for their ongoing support, and I appreciate your attendance here today. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Education takes bullying in all forms very seriously. As the Minister of Education and the Minister responsible for youth, I feel I must speak out to defend the young people who are being victimized by cyberbullying, both on the internet and mobile devices. The events of the past week are a stark reminder that we, as Nova Scotians, as a caring society that puts family above all else, have much more to do to safeguard our children. Nobody wants their child to be a victim of bullying. Children need to be safe and protected at school and at home. Mr. Speaker, we all know that online bullying can have devastating and long-term effects on a child. It also has a devastating impact on parents who, of course, have no higher priority, no greater calling, but to love and protect their children. Imagine their heartbreak to find out that their child is being quietly victimized in their own home by the way of a flickering bit of text on a computer screen. hurtful, and indelible on the psyche of a young mind. Social media and the internet has opened up exciting new ways to communicate, but for all of the benefits of the digital age, it also has dangers. Bullying is not new, Mr. Speaker, but social media has certainly given bullies a new and troubling effective tool to cause harm and emotional trauma. All someone has to do is sit down at a computer, type in the slanderous message, and press send. It's easy, fast, and reaches a large amount of viewers. But most importantly, it can be completely anonymous. I think we can all agree that anonymous slander is cowardly, yet that does not stop people from doing it. Together, we need to teach our children about the consequences bullying can have on the other side of the connection. It may seem harmless on the keyboard, but as we have all seen, it can be tremendously damaging on a screen. The Department of Education and school boards all have policies in place, Mr. Speaker, to address bullying and to promote good behavior in our schools. But more must be done, I believe. We have to stay vigilant and continue to adapt our policies and practices as well as our resources to adequately address the constantly evolving issue. Cyberbullying is increasingly relevant issue for our schools, but it is complex, and so much of it occurs outside of the classroom. This is a societal problem that requires a societal response. We all have a role to play. If we don't address this problem as a society, then our children will continue to be victimized. All of us, as adults, need to set a good example for our children to promote a civil society and respect for each other. The fight against cyberbullying will largely be won through an asset-based approach like positive youth development, social and emotional learning, and creating healthy online and offline environments. Mr. Speaker, my department is ready to take a leadership role on this issue. The government cannot stop all bullying with a change in policies. We recognize that. But we have an obligation to bring people together to find solutions that help children and families to be and remain safe from bullying. Today, I would like to announce that we are creating a task force that will recommend solutions to deal with online bullying. We will be inviting our key stakeholders, justice, health and wellness, school boards, education partners, the RCMP, health professionals, mental health professionals, and health professionals, parents, students, teachers, and others to participate. Work will begin right away with a first meeting in May. The terms of reference are being developed now, but among them, the goal of the task force will be to consider these issues. The extent to which cyberbullying is occurring among school-aged children and youth, strengthening provincial and school policy around online bullying, including proactive strategies and consequences for bullies, guidelines to help school administrators address online abuse, legislative change, raising awareness and identifying resources that will better support students to develop digital literacy skills. The Media Awareness Network recently launched a digital literacy tool for secondary students called My World, and it has been approved for high school classrooms. Now, this is one example, Mr. Speaker, of an interactive resource that could be considered to help teens develop critical thinking skills and learn how to manage the risks and challenges of their online lives. Mr. Speaker, the department and boards have done a great deal of work addressing the complexities that surround bullying. For example, school boards have restricted student access to social media sites during school hours, as well as prohibiting the use of cell phones during class times. The department highlighted online bullying in the Provincial School Code of Conduct, and we are addressing issues of violence in our health education curriculum. We are also using various approaches to improve behaviour, such as positive effective behavioural supports, known as PEBs, and comprehensive guidance and counselling. On behalf of the province, I extend my sincere thanks to school boards for all their work to reduce bullying in our schools. Our immediate plan is to discuss with school mental health professionals, lawmakers, school boards, principals, parents, and all Nova Scotians how we can build on what is already being done. The task force needs to hear from Nova Scotians to make sure we are making the right decisions. In the fall of 2011, the Department of Education will consult with the public, especially young people, using a variety of tools, including the department's website and a Facebook page. The information gathered from the public and our partners must be closely examined before we can consider making changes to legislation. Mr. Speaker, the member from Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville, and ministerial assistant responsible for youth has been a leader on this issue, and he will lead 8 focus groups with young people around the province to build a better and clearer understanding of their concerns and their issues, and to hone the thinking of the task force in developing a response. And our goal is to have a report with recommendations in my hands by December 2011. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister of Youth, I call upon Nova Scotians to be leaders in the fight against bullying. The Department of Education and the province will do its part to fight cyberbullying. It is up to all of us to help prevent further suffering. We owe it to our children to do everything that we can to protect them and keep them safe. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Minister for speaking to me on Monday about her statement and for sending a copy to the office this morning. I appreciate that. I would also like to thank her for taking the lead on this issue. And as we know, and as the Minister has stated, this is a social issue. It is not an education issue, but education and the school environment appears to be the place where we have collectively young people who are coming together and who are playing out some of their emotions and some of their feelings and some of their responses to what has happened out in the community. We, Mr. Speaker, as you know, have students in our schools 5 out of the 24 hours. The other 19 hours is where the community, the parents, and others need to come together to try to help address the problem. And Mr. Speaker, as we know, it is a problem. We recognize that boards and schools have done a lot in the past, and then in the recent past, if you think back to 2007, when we had the 2 boys, David Shepard and Travis Price, who were the boys who stood up for bullying. The Pink Shirt Day developed out of that. An anti-bullying day was introduced across the province in all of our schools, and those activities are things that provide awareness for the problem that exists. What I see, what I hear in the minister's statement, and what I believe the minister wants out of the task force is not only awareness, but solutions, because I think we do know it exists. Our challenge is, how do you work with the youth themselves and the parents and the community and the educators to look for and implement solutions. We know that this cannot continue, and we know that someone has to step up to the plate. So I want to thank the minister in her capacity as Minister of Youth for taking on the leadership and for laying out for us and for all Nova Scotians today what she expects to happen as a result of the task force, the consultation, the broad range of people who will be involved in the consultation, and the timeline, because I think that's important. We can talk about a task force and we can talk about what we hope will happen, but sometimes those things go on and on and on, and we know that this cannot. We have had some tragedies. We understand that they have been perhaps directly and maybe indirectly related to some kind of cyberbullying. So we don't have time. Parents don't have any more time. They need to know that there will be some concrete efforts that come out of this. So setting a timeline, the minister has asked that the results of the task force consultations be in her hands, and I commend her for that. that is reassuring to all of us that something will happen, something constructive will happen. So I'm going to take my seat, but I do want to say congratulations. As a caucus, we are fully in support of the minister's statement and of the minister's plan, and we will do whatever we can to try to make our youth safe in Nova Scotia. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to begin by thanking the Minister for speaking to us on Monday about this issue and also for providing us with a copy of her comments today. I am not the education critic for my party, that is the member for Argyll, but clearly this is an issue of pressing and tragic importance that reaches beyond departments. It reaches beyond rural and urban. It affects all towns and villages and the cities of our province. And most recently, Mr. Speaker, I know too well from the town of Parsborough, where we have one of the more recent examples of a tragedy as the result of bullying and cyberbullying. The family there is one I've come to know over the last little while, and I think one of the hardest things any of us could do as an elected representative, as an MLA, hard for me, is to see something like this happen in our own area, or indeed anywhere in Nova Scotia. And so I just wanted to rise in my place today in support of the Minister and the actions that she is going to take, because we can only imagine how a child must feel when they are a victim of bullying and cyberbullying, where there is no escape, where their parents feel helpless to solve the problem, where teachers and principals feel helpless at times to solve the problem because it has now moved from the physical world into the cyber world, where a community, often in a small town knowing the individuals involved, although they're anonymous online, feels helpless. For that child to sense that there is no one that can help them out must be a terrible, horrible, tragic feeling indeed, and this is why it is so important and so urgent that the Minister carry on with her work, and I want her to know that she has our full support as she does so. I would only ask that the task force go about its work seeking real, meaningful policy solutions that give real teeth to communities to intervene, real teeth to principals and teachers and others in our schools, real teeth to the police or the RCMP or whoever may need to intervene on behalf of a child, and that the task force, when it does its work, comes forward with new policy recommendations that are solid and meaningful and harsh when necessary on the bullies themselves, as may well need to be the case, that has a role both for the parents of the victim but also for the parents of the bullies, because it takes everybody to address a situation as serious as this when a child is involved who is looking for someone to help. I would also add, Mr. Speaker, just before I take my place, that in too many cases a child has shown signs of depression as a result of bullying and has sought, or his or her parents have sought, help from our mental health system. And we know that the lineups can be long and that there are not enough resources to intervene immediately. But surely we have to find a way to get immediate help through mental health to parents and, most importantly, to the children themselves in their time of greatest need and greatest crisis. And so I encourage the Minister and her task force to go about their work with those comments in mind. And I thank you, Minister, and I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, nothing is more important to Nova Scotians than health care. Every one of us has had experience with the health care system, and we never underestimate the importance and the value it holds in our lives. Today, Mr. Speaker, the Premier and I were proud to be in Parsborough for what I consider to be one of the most important announcements I've made as Minister of Health and Wellness, the announcement of the first collaborative emergency centre in our province. As the Premier said this morning, we have heard countless stories from people about how scared they were that their small community hospital would close. And people told me that they hope if they had an emergency, it would not be at night or on the weekend, when they could rush to their hospital and find a closed door. Mr. Speaker, last year, the Parsboro Emergency Room was closed for 525 hours. It was closed 1,277 hours in the previous year. And some patients had to wait 2 to 3 weeks to see a primary care physician. Today, that community knows that these unpredictable closures and long waits for medical appointments are ending. Parsboro is home to our first collaborative emergency centre, which brings together emergency departments and local family practices working as a team to provide health care to Nova Scotians. Specifically, a collaborative emergency centre will provide access to primary health care by a team of professionals, including doctors and nurse practitioners, for extended hours, 7 days per week. Same day or next day access to appointments as needed. In many cases, this will enable symptoms to be caught early, which may prevent emergencies or a health crisis from developing. Advanced access to care, which means that appointments will be left open each day for patients with more urgent needs. 24/7 access to emergency care. In Parsboro, overnight care will be provided by a paramedic supported by physician oversight. Other CECs, yet to be announced, may be staffed by paramedics or other healthcare providers, again, with physician oversight. The CEC will benefit the community in a number of ways. For example, community doctors will not have to staff the ER at night. Therefore, they will be available to see patients for longer hours in the daytime. Mr. Speaker, a number of communities from across Nova Scotia already have embraced collaborative practice, and both community members and healthcare providers speak positively about the results. For instance, Dr. Karen Fewer from Musquodoboit is happy that her patients now benefit from same-day access to primary care. Kimberly Brown, a nurse practitioner in Tatamagouche, has mentioned to me how the collaborative care practice in her community has decreased visits to the ER. And Sandy McLaughlin from Musquodoboit has told me how much she appreciates the collaborative practice in her community and how it enables her to get her prescriptions filled faster. Mr. Speaker, collaborative emergency centres are part of the province's Better Care Sooner plan. The plan is based on the recommendations of Dr. John Ross, who said the emergency department is a canary in the coal mine, alerting people to the troubles that are putting the entire healthcare system at risk. And Mr. Speaker, I agree with Dr. Ross. When I launched the Better Care Sooner plan in December in Musquodoboit, I said that needed to change. And Mr. Speaker, I am here today to tell you and members of this Assembly that change is already taking place. Since last fall, we have seen almost 1,200 patients headed for the emergency rooms diverted to the new rapid assessment unit at our busiest ER in Halifax, getting them better care sooner. We are hiring 4 nurse practitioners this year to work in nursing homes in 4 districts across the province. We have also started hiring paramedics to work at nursing homes, so Nova Scotia's highly trained paramedics will be able to treat seniors in the place they live rather than making the frail and elderly wait in ambulances at the ER. We have trained advanced care paramedics to immediately give life-saving drugs to Nova Scotians having heart attacks rather than waiting until they arrive at the hospital to receive this care. And the province launched a public awareness campaign so people across this province know they can call a nurse 24 hours a day and receive professional advice on the phone. Mr. Speaker, the CEC in Parsboro will begin operation in July of this year. This will give the people working there and the community the time to get ready. I look forward to opening more collaborative emergency centers later this year as more communities get ready. Mr. Speaker, I would like to end my statement by thanking officials with the Cumberland District Health Authority and staff in Parsboro at the hospital, the nurses, doctors, dietitians, paramedics, physiotherapists, and other healthcare professionals who are embracing this new way to deliver healthcare. They know better than most that changes are needed to ensure that their patients get the best care possible. Mr. Speaker, these people have already started working to make the necessary changes by providing them with collaborative practice. Now it will be extended to include emergency care. They are leaders in healthcare in Nova Scotia, and I want to recognize them for that, Mr. Speaker. And we will work through this journey together to improve healthcare across this province, to deliver better care sooner, stability, and peace of mind. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the Minister for providing us with an advance copy of her remarks as well today. And I trust she had a good day in Parsboro, which is a place close to my heart. It's a place I spend time in the summers and have family from. First and foremost, again, our caucus believes that there's been a great deal of hard work done on the part of the Cumberland District Health Authority, and that the service that was available in Parsboro has already been a collaborative practice model. And I believe the Minister had said previously in public statements that as this emergency model rolls out, the collaborative emergency centre model, that she would be looking for communities that were already well advanced in terms of a collaborative model and had already taken steps in that regard. And I think Parsboro is a good model, and that really this is an incremental step to the changes on the emergency side, because they do already have a nurse practitioner in Parsboro. And although the Minister referred to long waits for the doctor, there has been a drop-in and an ability to go to the community health centre and see a nurse practitioner during the day on a daily basis and on a timely basis. So I think Parsboro has been a model that way, and I know there are others in the province as well. We understand this to be a furthering of the recommendations of the Ross report, which was released last fall. And we feel that the Ross report was certainly comprehensive, but the two main things that are sort of drawn together there are things that we already knew here, and so do Nova Scotians, and that is that too many people use the ER as a portal to get primary health care, and secondly, that our healthcare professionals are not working to their full scope of practice. So today's announcement is all about connecting those dots and ensuring access into the healthcare system. I note with interest that the centre is due to open July 1st, and having said that Parsborough is already well advanced, I'm not sure what the delay is really for. I trust that the residents of Parsborough can be assured that until the time that the centre opens, all efforts will be made to continue to have the ER open 24/7. Until that replacement comes, it's important to the people of that area to have that assurance. And again, let's be clear, Mr. Speaker, the government promised in the last election that emergency rooms would be available and staffed and open 24/7. Recently, the budget announced that there would as well be 4 collaborative emergency room centres open across the province, and I would have hoped that today we might have heard where the other centres will be. Across the province, there are a lot of communities that are anxious about what the changes are, whether their community will be seen to be one that's far enough advanced on this model that perhaps they will be included this year. And I think that the minister has in previous statements provided updates, and I would hope that we'll hear soon when we might be able to identify the other 3 communities that are waiting. And again, in the meantime, continue to ensure that emergency rooms do remain open 24/7, because that is, after all, the promise that was made by the government in the last election. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to start off by thanking the minister for making her remarks available to us in anticipation of this response. Mr. Speaker, today's unveiling of the collaborative care centres is a far cry from what was promised to Nova Scotians by this government in the election campaign that brought them to government, which of course was to keep all ERs open 24/7. The thoughtful recommendations of Dr. Ross, however, deserve practical steps forward. The fact is that numbers will tell the story of collaborative care centres. Do we believe that Nova Scotian doctors will see more patients? No. Do we believe that Nova Scotians will forget what they were promised by this government? No, they won't. We believe that this is not what was promised to Nova Scotians by this government, but a practical step forward based on the recommendation held in Dr. John Ross's report. There are unanswered questions that will become apparent over time. Will Nova Scotians find themselves in front of a paramedic when they need to see a doctor? Will this program increase the hours of doctor access, or will it decrease them? Nova Scotians will soon decide for themselves if the collaborative care centres work for them. Improving emergency care is a primary goal of these efforts, and allowing the recommendation of the Dr. Ross report are a first good step to enhancing a system that we currently have. So I know that it will be over time that we will have the opportunity to see the success or the checkered success of this. Well, you never know, right? I know the Premier is egging me on here a little bit, but you know, any move forward in trying to fix some of these very, very structural problems, I think is a good move forward, and I thank the Minister for her comments on this today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Government notices of motion. Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I may, I have a few introductions I'd like to make in your gallery, if I may.
Please feel free.
Mr. Speaker, joining us today are the following: Major Todd, representing Lieutenant Colonel Hale of the 1st Battalion, Nova Scotia Highlanders; Regimental Sergeant Major Forbes of the 1st Battalion, Nova Scotia Highlanders; Corporal Sylvia of the 1st Battalion, Nova Scotia Highlanders; Private Mackenzie, the 1st Battalion, Nova Scotia Highlanders; Sergeant Taylor of the Cape Breton Highlanders; and Pipe Major Campbell of the Cape Breton Highlanders. And before I begin, Mr. Speaker, I'd also, of course, like to congratulate you on your recent appointment as an honorary member of the Cape Breton Highlanders. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas both the 1st Battalion of the Nova Scotia Highlanders and the newly renamed Cape Breton Highlanders are celebrating 140 years of Highland military tradition in Nova Scotia. And whereas the Nova Scotia and Cape Breton Highlanders have a long and renowned history dating back to the formation of the Cumberland Provisional and the Victoria Provisional Battalions of Infantry in 1871, and served valiantly in such battles as Ypres, Passchendaele, Vimy, the Normandy landings, the Gothic Line, Calais, and numerous other battles for which they received battle honors. And whereas the tradition continues with the men and women of the Nova Scotia Highlanders and the Cape Breton Highlanders as they carry out their duties in the service of Canada, both here at home when called upon to assist in Juan cleanup, the Manitoba floods, and in places around the world like Afghanistan, the former Yugoslavia, Haiti, and Sierra Leone. Therefore, be it resolved that this House recognize and celebrate the 140th anniversary of the creation of the units that would become the North Nova Scotia Highlanders, the Cape Breton and Pictou Highlanders, as well recognize the commitment of the current members of the Nova Scotia Highlanders and Cape Breton Highlanders who continue to carry on this proud tradition both at home and around the world. Sialna Fair Farewell. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate. There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. Motion is carried. Order. The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas as part of a continuous quality improvement process that occurs every 3 years, more than 2,500 standards were thoroughly reviewed at the Pictou County Health Authority, and whereas the Pictou County Health Authority received commendation in a number of areas, including programming, quality safety programs, innovative staff, and a strong connection to the community, and whereas by evaluating the quality of care that the Pictou County Health Authority delivers, they are able to measure both their clinical and operational performance. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House join me in congratulating the Pictou County Health Authority in achieving a 95% compliance rate on the on-site portion of its 2011 Accreditation Canada survey. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Communities, Culture and Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's rich Scottish heritage contributes to our province's unique and diverse culture, which makes us one of the best places to visit, do business, and build a life. And whereas April 6th is the day when people of Scottish heritage are encouraged to celebrate their contributions made by their culture to their proud legacy as part of Tartan Day. And whereas Nova Scotia was the first to proclaim Tartan Day in 1987 as an annual way to acknowledge and celebrate the pivotal role played by Scottish culture and traditions in the world history. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House and all Nova Scotians be encouraged to celebrate and embrace our Scottish heritage on this day and throughout the year, Mr. Speaker. I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, just prior to that, I would like to make an introduction, if I may.
Please do so.
Thank you very much. I would just like to draw the attention of the members of the House to the West Gallery, where we're joined by many young people and parents and advocates for juvenile diabetes and the Diabetes Association. So there are many of them there. I'm not going to name everybody, but I would like to ask if you would rise and receive the, or pardon me, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask if they would rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please do. We welcome all guests to our gallery and hope they enjoy today's proceeding. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park. On the introduction of a bill.
I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Support Diabetic Persons in Nova Scotia.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Support Diabetic Persons in Nova Scotia.
Bill number 11, an act to support diabetic persons in Nova Scotia.
Notices of motion. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll be reading this resolution on behalf of the member from Annapolis. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on April 4th, the Premier waved his magic wand and produced a $447 million surplus for last fiscal year, a number which was miscalculated by a mere $669 million. And whereas yesterday the Minister of Finance tabled a budget document titled Budget Assumptions and Schedules, the same title given to the document last year that turned a $222 million deficit into a $447 million surplus. And whereas this government stands by its necessity of its HST increase and has since increased user fees and announced it will download $50 million onto property owners in this province. Therefore, be it resolved that as a result of government's recent budget announcements and actions, both past and present, the budget assumptions and schedules document be renamed Budget Inventions and Fabrications.
The motion is tabled. Before the next notice of motion, I would like to also introduce in my gallery Private Williams of the Cape Breton Highlanders. I like this. He's in the gallery also, so thank you. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas April 6th is International Tartan Day, a celebration of Scottish heritage, and whereas Tartan Day in Canada originated in 1986 with a proposal from the Federation of Scottish Clans in Nova Scotia to promote Scottish heritage by the most visual means. And whereas on April 6th, all people in New Scotland are Scots at heart and celebrate the many contributions Scottish people have made to our province. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly mark International Tartan Day on April 6th and remember the many ways Scottish heritage has contributed to our great province. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas February 3rd marked the opening ceremonies of the 2011 Special Olympics Winter Games in Pictou County. Whereas the Special Olympics Winter Games are a great opportunity for athletes to gather in a competitive sport, enjoy each other's company, and for some athletes to travel to a new location. And whereas the Games could not have come to Pictou County without the hard work and dedication of many volunteers, as this was only the second time in 40-year history of the Games that they have been held by a community. Therefore, be it resolved that a member of this House of Assembly congratulate the athletes on a job well done and wish the community of Pictou County great success hosting the 2011 Special Olympics Winter Games. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas yesterday, the Minister of Finance proudly proclaimed the government was behaving in a fiscally responsible manner with freezing spending in a way that pleased Nova Scotians. And whereas this government happily increased taxes and user fees to fund their spending increases of 9% and 7% in their first two budgets, and 6% in this year's budget, and close to half of the departments have increased spending this year. And whereas, in light of this government's inability to accurately measure, crunch numbers, and produce estimates that resulted in the real number being more than $600 million off the mark, therefore be it resolved, the members of the House of Assembly recognize that the budget and the numbers and projections contained therein are as real as the Finance Minister's new shoes.
The motion is tabled. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Lower Churchill Agreement between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland provides all of Atlantic Canada with a significant environmental and economic development opportunity. And whereas this agreement has gained the support of all parties in this House, and whereas this agreement was put at risk when federal Liberal leader Michael Ignatieff said he would find a way to, quote, wield this power through Quebec, end quote, and promise a, quote, activist federal role, end quote, to do so, which would cut Nova Scotia out of the loop on either Muskrat Falls development or future developments such as Gull Island. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly demand that Mr. Ignatieff apologize for his reckless campaign comments that fail to recognize the enormous value of this historic agreement between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, order, please. Order. Order. The Honourable Minister for Labour and Advanced Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Dartmouth Curling Club was formed in 1936 and early members curled on natural ice in the annex of the old molasses factory on Lower Canal Street and the Dartmouth Lakes before building its distinctive circular roofed facility nearly 65 years ago on land purchased from Star Manufacturing for $3,000. And whereas this club has a long tradition of winning and hosting provincial championships, including hosting the successful 2011 Nova Scotia Men's Molson Provincial Championships February 2nd to 6th. And whereas this club, currently celebrating their 75th anniversary, has over 500 current members, and its proven volunteer vitality and organizational strength has led it to being one of the very few Canadian curling clubs to have a waiting list. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulate the Dartmouth Curling Club as it celebrates its 75th anniversary throughout 2011 and recognize its many contributions to the recreational, sporting, and social traditions of the Dartmouth area. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Inverness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Elizabeth Beaton, a well-known piano player and grandmother of her former Premier Rodney MacDonald, passed away last week at the age of 92. And whereas Mrs. Beaton accompanied her husband, the late fiddle player Donald Angus Beaton, at thousands of concerts, weddings, and public gatherings. And whereas Mr. and Mrs. Beaton's recording, The Beatons of Mabou, is a recognized standard of the Mabou coal mines fiddling tradition. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly remember the important contributions of Mrs. Elizabeth Beaton, the contribution she has made to the culture of this province, and send our most sincere condolences to her friends and family. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Halifax Regional School Board Principal Kevin Power has been selected as one of Canada's outstanding principals by the Learning Partnership, a Toronto-based national charitable group. And whereas Mr. Power is currently the principal of École Beachville Lakeside Timberley, a primary to grade 5 school with an enrollment of 730 students. Whereas throughout his career as a principal, Kevin has demonstrated leadership and commitment. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Kevin Power on his selection as one of Canada's most outstanding school principals. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in the fall of 2010, Janice Kosser, formerly of Ingramport, was inducted into the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame. And whereas Ms. Kosser is a multi-sport athlete who excelled at varsity soccer, field hockey, ice hockey, ringette, softball, and basketball. And whereas Ms. Kosser continues to be involved in sports such as cycling and hiking and gives back to the sports community by coaching and conducting clinics. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate Janet Kosser on being inducted into the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame and wishes her all the best in the years to come. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I apologize for my delay here. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the New Minas Volunteer Fire Department held its annual banquet and awards presentation on December the 11th, 2010, and whereas when a firefighter receives a call to attend a fire or accident, he or she is never sure if they will return home safe or unharmed from a call-out. And whereas the banquet and awards presentation, Sam Milne was recognized for 50 years of service, Donald Morayan for 30 years of service, Donald Swicker for 30 years of service, and Fire Chief James Redden for 25 years of service. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulates Sam Milne, Donald Morayan, Donald Swicker, and James Redmond for their support of the fire department and their community of New Minas. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the cooperative movement began in Nova Scotia in Stellarton in 1861, and whereas farmers and shoppers in Hants East have enjoyed the benefits of the cooperative stores in Milford for many years, and whereas the Corridor Co-op Country Store was recently presented with an Achievement Award from Co-op Atlantic for Best Financial Improvement, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulates the management and staff at Corridor Co-op Country Store on their award and wishes them success in the future. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cape Sable Island, Nova Scotia youth Brendan Nicholson was a member of the Nova Scotia men's hockey team that competed at the 2011 Cantor Games hosted by Halifax from February the 11th to the 27th, 2011. And whereas Brendan Nicholson, at 14 years of age, was the youngest player on the team, earning his spot on the roster as a defenseman during the team's tryout in the summer of 2010. And whereas Brendan Nicholson, who was only one of the only playing hockey players for 5 years, who has only been playing hockey for 5 years, is excelling at the sport, playing at the AAA hockey, and the major midget levels for the past 2 years. Therefore, it be resolved that the House of Assembly congratulate Brendan Nicholson, the youngest member of the Nova Scotia's men hockey team, for qualifying and competing at the 2011 Canada Games hosted by Halifax from February the 11th, 2011. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice, and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas one of the goals of the 4-H program in Canada is to help develop and encourage leadership abilities in all its members, and whereas Sandy Sutherland of River John, Pictou County, is an active member of the River John 4-H Club and has been invited to attend the 4-H 39th Annual National Citizenship Seminar in Ottawa, April 8th to the 14th of this year. And whereas Sandy Sutherland will be part of a group of 10 4-H members from Nova Scotia who will be representing this province at the 4-H 39th Annual National Citizenship Seminar. Therefore, it be resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly congratulate Sandy Sutherland on being invited to participate in the National 4-H Seminar as an ambassador for River John, Nova Scotia, and his local club, and wish him success in his future projects. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas John Walker is one of Canada's finest directors and cinematographers working in the documentary genre, and whereas his film, A Drummer's Dream, tells the story of a rare and unique assembly of some of the greatest drummers in the world who share their knowledge with 40 students for an incredible week of music and camaraderie. And whereas A Drummer's Dream was recently awarded Best Performing Arts Film at the 24th Annual Festival International de Programmes Audiovisuels in Biarritz, France, won a Top 10 Audience Favorite Award at the Hot Docs Canadian International Documentary Film Festival, and one of the Top 10 Canadian films at the Vancouver International Film Festival. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulates Director John Walker for his critical success with A Drummer's Dream and for his outstanding contributions to the world of documentary filmmaking. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the grades 7, 8, and 9 students of North Queens Community School were involved in an interdisciplinary unit covering English, math, science, and social studies. And whereas the interdisciplinary unit focused on entrepreneurship, advertising, technology, budgeting, and written languages, both in French and English. And whereas students were recognized for most innovative product, highest profit, advertising, outstanding sales approach, logo, booth, marketing presentation, and marketing presentation. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulates and recognizes the grades 7, 8, and 9 students of North Queens Community School for their successful involvement in the interdisciplinary unit at their school. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. The motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Antigonish.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Ordre de Pléiade, an international honour bestowed by the Assemblée Parlementaire de la Francophonie, recognizes individuals who have distinguished themselves serving the ideals of the Francophonie community, and whereas the Nova Scotia section of the Assemblée Parlementaire de la Francophonie attended 10 appointed 10 Nova Scotians to the Grade de Chevalier on March 23rd, and whereas May Boucher of Pomkit, Antigonish County, was one of this year's inductees to the Ordre de la Pléiade for her dedication to her community and to the Acadian culture, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate May Bouchard for her commitment to the development of the Acadian and Francophone community in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Donald Keddy was a young hockey player who lost his battle with cancer at the age of 18, and whereas the Donald Keddy Memorial Hockey Tournament has been a very successful annual fundraiser, and whereas the tournament organized by Bookie McDonald has been raising awareness regarding the reality of cancer and raising funds in support of Nova Scotia cancer programs. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly congratulate Bookie McDonald for his commitment to organizing this event over the past 27 years. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
A request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cumberland North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cumberland North prides itself on working towards greener communities, and whereas LED roadway lighting provides a great number of employment opportunities for constituents of Cumberland North and thus contributes to a strengthened economy, and whereas LED roadway lighting recently received substantial funding and plans to use this funding to simultaneously expand the use of its environmentally conscious lighting technology and to create more employment opportunities for the constituents of Cumberland North. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulate LED roadway lighting on receiving project funding and thank them for their efforts in promoting sustainable environment and a sustainable economy. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Hammonds Plains Upper Sackville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Brittany Haverstock of Hammonds Plains is a junior and sociology major at the University of Wisconsin, where she also plays university hockey. And whereas she has achieved many athletic goals, including assisting Canada's under-22 team win silver at the 2009 MLP Cup in Ravensburg, Germany. And whereas on March 3rd, 2011, Brittany Haverstock was named to the All-WCHA third team, a highly regarded position that requires students to have completed a year of eligibility at their post-secondary institution while maintaining at least a 3.0 GPA. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate Brittany Haverstock of Hammonds Plains and the University of Wisconsin Badgers on being awarded on a position on the ALL WCHA third team and wish her and her teammates the best of luck in the upcoming season. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the staff of the Port Williams Elementary School, including Leanne Baird, Kim Christie, Holly Sheffield, Kathy Woodford, Heather Krause, and Kathy Reamer, have a reputation for positive and effective work with autistic children. And whereas the Provincial Autism Centre has created an award named in honour of Sheila Nolan, who worked to ensure that specialized and appropriate support for autistic children is available in Nova Scotia schools. And whereas parents of autistic children at Port Williams Elementary School, who are pleased with their children's academic and social progress and grateful to teachers and the staff of the school, have nominated several teachers for the Provincial Autism Centre's Award. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulates Leanne Baird, Kim Christie, Holly Sheffield, Kathy Woodford, Heather Krause, and Kathy Reamer, and all the staff of the Port Williams Elementary School for being recognized with the Provincial Autism Centre's 2010 Sheila Nolan Award for Excellence in Teaching. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Lunenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Guinness Book of World Records is considered to be the ultimate authority on record-breaking achievement, and whereas the Nova Scotia elementary students set out to break the world record of the most snow angels made simultaneously, a record of 8,962 snow angels was set in February 17, 2007 in North Dakota, and whereas on February 10th, 2011, at 1 p.m. in Nova Scotia, the elementary students made 22,022 snow angels at over 130 locations across the province, including Bayview Community Centre, Centre Consolidated School, Lunenburg Academy, and the New Germany Elementary School, making Nova Scotia a contender for the new world record. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly recognizes the participation of Bayview Centre, Lunenburg, and New Germany schools as part of the 130 schools across Nova Scotia who took part in the Snow Angel Challenge on February 10th to set the new world record. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on Friday, March 4th, Ance McDonald traveled to Halifax to accept the Frank Baldwin Award from Basketball Nova Scotia for his contributions as a builder of the sport. And whereas it is started in 1976 when Ance was asked to assist with raising funds for the midget basketball team his son played on, and over the next 8 years, Ance raised funds for the Glasgow Junior High Panthers program, founded the Reeds Carpet Junior High tournament, and started the Men's Summer League, which is still running strong. Whereas Ance also founded the Glasgow High Classic Basketball Tournament, helped organize a trip for the Glasgow High School Panthers to attend the Celtic Games in 1991, and over the years was instrumental in arranging for 3 local teams to participate in the prestigious week-long Cole Bowl tournament in New Waterford, to name a few. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly recognize and congratulate Ance McDonald for all the hard work and his years of dedication to basketball in Pictou County area. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Donna Hopkinson is retiring from her all-encompassing role at Brookside Junior High School on the Prospect Road. Whereas Donna allowed school board officials, teachers, and principals, and this speaker in particular, to think that we actually ran Brookside Junior High when we all knew that Ms. Hopkinson made our school tick. And whereas Donna Hopkinson, school secretary, conscientious organizer, tireless taskmaster, and consummate professional, will be missed at Brookside Junior High. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Donna Hopkinson on her retirement with best wishes of many great years in the future. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister for Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Chester Special Olympics curling team competed in New Glasgow in the Nova Scotia Special Olympics Winter Games with 15 other teams. And whereas this team consists of Sean Giffen, the skip, Mark Swinimer, the mate, Krista Stokeman, second, Floyd Thompson, lead, and Spear Seppi Vogali, and are coached by Robin Bond and Jim Stockman. And whereas all members of the team enjoyed their time in New Glasgow, meeting new friends, and most of all, doing what they love, curling. The team was successful in the tournament and came home with gold medals around their necks. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly congratulate the members of Team Giffen on their success at this tournament and in future tournaments, as they show us anything can be accomplished with a goal. And if you fall short of that goal, as long as you have had fun and done your best, that is all that matters. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on Wednesday, May the 11th, the Wolfville Area Interchurch Council will be celebrating 40 years of service to the Wolfville community. Whereas the Wolfville Area Interchurch Council has been responsible for building low-cost housing, hearth homes and habitat homes, and whereas the Wolfville Area Interchurch Council has established and operates the Wolfville Area Food Bank, Clothing Depot, and Used Furniture Exchange. Whereas, be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulates the Wolfville Area Interchurch Council for its contribution to the citizens of Wolfville and surrounding areas. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? There has been a request for waiver. As in agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Shelby musician, singer, songwriter Alex Buchanan celebrated the opening of his recording studio, Harbour Tone Productions, with an open house on February 11th and 12th, 2011. And whereas Alex Buchanan, who is a graduate of the Nova Scotia Community College Recording Arts Program, has been making a name for himself in the music industry since the age of 15 as a live sound engineer. And whereas Alex Buchanan, at 20 years of age, is a shining example of Nova Scotia's youth being able to pursue his lifelong dream of a career in music industry in his hometown. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly congratulate Shelburne musician, singer, songwriter Alex Buchanan for opening his new recording studio, Harbour Tone Productions, on February the 11th and 12th, 2011. Mr. Speaker, request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas one of the goals of the 4-H program in Canada is to help develop and encourage leadership abilities in all its members, and whereas Kayla Graham of Rockfield, Pictou County is an active member of the Scotsburn 4-H Club and has been invited to attend the 4-H 39th Annual National Citizenship Seminar in Ottawa on April 8th to 14th of this year, and whereas Ms. Graham will be a part of 10 4-H members from Nova Scotia who will be representing this province at the 4-H 39th Annual National Citizenship Seminar. Therefore, it be resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly congratulate Kayla Graham on being invited to participate in the National 4-H Seminar as an ambassador for Scotsburn, Nova Scotia, and her club, and wish her success in her future projects. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Poets for Change is an arts for social change project that develops programs for youth to collaborate with spoken word and visual artists to help create poetry and art to benefit charitable organizations and connect with volunteers working in these organizations. And whereas over the past 8 months, a community of youth and adults have worked to create new poetry and visual arts projects to be exhibited at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia and sold or auctioned, with proceeds benefiting the Pakistan Food Relief, Grandmothers to Grandmothers, the Stephen Lewis Foundation, Kids Help Phone, and Leave Out Violence. And whereas this project is made possible by the 4C Foundation with support from the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia and One Light Theatre, with youth facilitators Sophie Kaufman, Gillian Shields, Desiree Adams, and the leadership of project coordinator Shante Grant and the Poets for Change facilitation team, therefore be it resolved that this House of Assembly congratulates Poets for Change youth facilitators Sophie Kaufman, Gillian Shields, Desiree Adams, and project facilitator Shante Grant for helping our spoken word artists and visual artists to use their considerable creative talents and energy to bring about and help support social change. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas food banks have become a fixture in our communities and the students of South Queens Junior High recognized the need to help others and took on the challenge with a local high school to raise items for the food bank. And whereas each grade in the school worked together to raise donations by caroling outside of the local post office and held many other activities. And whereas the school and students won the competition with the local high school by collecting 301 items as well as financial donations for the Queens County Food Bank. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly congratulates and recognizes the students of South Queens Junior High for their fundraising efforts to assist the Queens County Food Bank. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. The motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the people of Plymouth, Pictou County, expressed concerns over their community centre sitting idle and decided to do something about it. And whereas several interested people in the Plymouth area, including Municipal Councillor Andy Thompson, understood the need for a centre that could cater to community meetings, events, and offer special programming for seniors and those with disabilities. And whereas the community has renovated a room for seniors events, upgraded the main hall for community use, and built a gazebo allowing for outdoor entertainment and activities, therefore be it resolved that members of the Nova Scotia Legislative Assembly congratulate Municipal Councillor Andy Thompson and the President and the Board of Directors for re-establishing the Plymouth Community Centre and for creating a stronger sense of community for the residents of Plymouth and area. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Antigonish.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on January the 12th, 2011, the Guysborough-Antigonish Strait Health Authority, GASHA, was named one of Atlantic Canada's top employers for the second consecutive year by Medicor Inc. And whereas maternity leave top-up payments, a designated mediation room, and retirement planning assistance are among the factors which contributed to GASHA being selected as a top Atlantic Canadian employer. And whereas GASHA CEO Kevin MacDonald cites the people who work there as the reason behind GASHA's success, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House congratulate GASHA on being named one of Atlantic Canada's top employers and thank GASHA staff, physicians and managers for their continued hard work and dedication. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Hammonds Plains resident and Acadia University student Megan McDougall is a member of the university's volleyball team for the first year, and whereas on March 4th, 2011, Atlantic University Sport announced that Megan McDougall was chosen to represent Acadia University on the ASU All-Rookie team, and whereas she has shown strong performance this season on Acadia's women's volleyball team and is the only member from the university to be appointed by the ASU this season. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate Hammonds Plains resident Megan McDougall on being chosen to represent Acadia University on the Atlantic University Sport 2010-2011 All-Rookie team. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
For waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Brandon Whitney of Centerville has played on both high school and major midget hockey teams as a goaltender and was the only Annapolis Valley player on Team Atlantic in the 2011 World Under-17 Hockey Challenge, and whereas Team Atlantic won 3 of its 5 games and finished 5th overall in the 2011 Winnipeg tournament, Team Atlantic's best standing since 2005, and whereas Brandon Whitney was named Team Atlantic's Player of the Game after stopping 30 out of 32 shots during the 5th place game, therefore be it resolved that the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulates Brandon Whitney and Team Atlantic's players, coaches and manager for their hard work and dedication throughout the year and on their excellent results in the 2011 World Under-17 Hockey Challenge. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Lunenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the South Shore chapter of the Council of Canadians is presenting its 2nd annual Earth Dream Film Festival at the Mahone Bay Centre in Mahone Bay on April 8th to 10th, 2011, and whereas the topic of this year's festival is peace, with films examining Canada's role in war and peace, including titles such as Myths for Profit, Canada's Role in the Industries of War and Peace, Voices in Wartime, and Soldiers for Peace. And whereas several guest speakers will participate in the festival, including Scott Taylor speaking about his film Afghanistan Outside the Wire, as well as discussion hosted by well-known Halifax peace activist Tamara Lawrence. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly recognize the 2nd annual Earth Dream Film Festival hosted by the South Shore chapter of the Council of Canadians at the Mahone Bay Centre. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. All those against say nay. The motion is carried. Oral questions put by members to ministers. It is now 3:30. We will finish question period at 5 p.m. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians want to know what is going on at One Government Place. They want to know how their government can make a $2/3 of $1 billion mistake with their tax money. They want to know why they're paying higher fees while their income get taxed at a higher rate. And they want to know why this Premier says one thing and does another. So my question to the Premier, with an HST hike in full effect, higher user fees, and more of their income being taxed every year by the NDP, why should Nova Scotians believe any projections that the government puts on paper?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure what the point of that question was. That's not unusual for the questions from the opposition. I just hope that the opposition will not be arguing against a budget that delivers an income tax cut for Nova Scotians and delivers a small business tax cut.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The increased spending in the first year of their mandate, Mr. Speaker, the increased spending in the second year by 7%, Mr. Speaker, and despite the talking points, we're well on our way for our third year of increase in spending. So my question to the Premier, how can Nova Scotians have any faith in the government's plan when history and evidence show that the NDP has a track record of manipulating targets to suit their own agenda?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, none of that is true. And the problem with the opposition is that although they get to ask questions every day, we do remember what they asked about yesterday, or the day before, or the day before that. And this is an opposition that complained bitterly about the reduction that we brought in expenses, and now says that that we're spending too much.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this government hasn't brought in a single reduction, Mr. Speaker. In year one, they've had increased spending by 9%, year two by 7%, and we're well on our way for increased spending next year, Mr. Speaker. Every user fee in this province is going up, Mr. Speaker, and Nova Scotians are paying more tax because they're breaking another promise to eliminate bracket creep. My question to the Premier, since yesterday the Minister of Finance doesn't seem to understand the role of the Auditor General when he stood behind him yesterday, I would like to ask the Premier, will he make the call to the Auditor General to have someone clarify his projections to make sure they're actually accurate?
Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the opinion of the Auditor General is right here. I can point to it in the budget assumption schedules, Mr. Speaker. It supports what the Minister of Finance has said. And, Mr. Speaker, further, the opposition is wrong because in this budget, with the increase in the personal exemption, the people of Nova Scotia get a tax cut.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. On Monday night in this House, Mr. Speaker, the Premier was boasting about his surplus and how for the first time in several years there would be an actual outright reduction in the net debt of the province, as there would be a payment of $37.8 million against that debt. Well, that didn't last long, Mr. Speaker. I wouldn't clap yet. That didn't last long because just one day later, his government tabled a budget which shows that they will increase the debt in the upcoming year by 23 times that amount, by $678.9 million, a rate of $1.8 million per day for every day of the upcoming year. And so my question to the Premier is this: how can he boast about a debt reduction that will only last for 20 days because of his new budget?
Hear, hear. Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I think all Nova Scotians recognize that whenever you're able to pay down debt, that is a good thing. We were very pleased that we were able to do that last year. The Minister of Finance has said that it was through a series of things that included some good fortune with respect to year-end adjustments from the federal government, but also from good management. And that, of course, was last year. This year, of course, the business of government has to continue. We have to continue to build schools. We have to continue to build roads. We have to continue to provide service to the people of Nova Scotia. If the Progressive Conservative leader is suggesting that we should cancel all the construction of schools and roads in this province, I'd like to know where he thinks we should start.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, what I am suggesting is that the government should not do one thing on Monday and the opposite on Tuesday. That is what I am suggesting. In the budget, Mr. Speaker, the Premier and his government show that in the last 2 years, since they took office, they've already added $700 million to our total debt. It is going up, not down, as they try to tell the people of Nova Scotia. Now they're going to add $678.9 million more in 1 year. Surely that is the fastest accumulation of debt in that short a period of time as we have ever seen. And so in 3 years.
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party with your question, please.
My question to the Premier is this, Mr. Speaker. Given $1.4 billion in new debt in 3 short years, will the Premier finally admit the truth that his plan is not working and send his Finance Minister back to the drawing board?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, not only is the plan presented by the Minister of Finance working, in fact, it's working better than we perhaps had forecast. We had a very good year last year, which meant that we were able to pay down some debt. We were able to pay off all of the capital expenses for the year. This, of course, is a very good thing. I said to the leader yesterday that it amazes me when he talks about this debt, because the debt that he's talking about is the debt that the members of his caucus ran on. It was what they were committed to over the last campaign. It is the one that they thumped their chest about all around the province of Nova Scotia. It is the one they entered into an agreement with when the federal government. It's hard to believe that they can stand up and say what they say about it today.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, that is the most bizarre defence of more debt that I have heard in a long time, but we are making progress. We're making progress here today in question period because at least the Premier is admitting to his record of debt accumulation over the last 3 years, and that is a first. That is a first in this House, Mr. Speaker. Sadly, though, by the government's own estimates, which I only hold up this far because it's not a prop, it's the government's own estimates. By their own estimates, going out to the end of 2015, this record of debt is only going to continue to go up into the foreseeable future, Mr. Speaker, with no end in sight. And so my final question to the Premier, will he table a new plan that finally stops running up the credit card before it's too late?
Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, unlike the previous governments here, what we have done is we have put forward, in fact, the capital projects that we intend to invest in over the next year. We've also set out a road paving plan that demonstrates how we intend to go forward with that. But again, I would invite the member opposite, if he doesn't want a school built, if he doesn't want a road paved, if there are capital expenses that he thinks we shouldn't be undertaking, would he please send us a list of what those capital projects are? Because I can tell I will make sure they get wide publication.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Premier and the Finance Minister have been talking about how they've been holding the line on spending. However, you look carefully at government, what government is actually doing, Mr. Speaker, has been increasing spending in every year of their mandate. About half of the government departments are going to spend more this year than they did last year, but the Finance Minister is trying to hide behind these increases through illusions and fabrications. So my question to the Premier, after hiking the HST and increasing 1,400 user fees, after leaking to the media that the Finance Minister made a $2/3 of $1 billion error on Monday night, why would the government continue to hide the true state of the finances from the people of Nova Scotia?
Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in fact, the things that the Leader of the Opposition say continues to be a fabrication, Mr. Speaker. But the reality is that expenses for the government are going to be flat this year. We have passed on to the DHAs, to the school boards, as he is well aware, what their budgets shall be for the upcoming year, and we've told them that they have to absorb their own wage increases. And he would know that the previous government, of course, negotiated rather substantial increases that continue to roll out for many years afterwards. And as I've said, these are essentially a millstone around the province's neck that was a gift from the former government.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Premier knows that's not true, Mr. Speaker. Even after you factor in the shell game that this government has been playing with university spending, you see that there's a continual increase in spending last year, the year before, and this year, Mr. Speaker, in the budget that was presented into this House. Mr. Speaker, that is not what this government is telling Nova Scotians. The finance minister has been spinning fantasies when in reality he isn't even accurate enough to catch two-thirds of $1 billion mistake, Mr. Speaker. My question to the Premier, how can Nova Scotians trust a government that posted a surplus which was off the mark by two-thirds of $1 billion one day, and they turn around and tell each Nova Scotian that they're going to have to continue to suffer with the HST and the user fee hikes his government has imposed?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the economic panel and the advice that we got from the economic experts pointed out that this province was on the track for a $1.4 billion deficit. We made a decision that we were going to deal with that in a way that made the most sense to all Nova Scotians. So we have, and I have to say, we have had some fairly good level of cooperation. And I would just point to the fact that the physicians in this province, Mr. Speaker, were gracious enough to put aside the contract that they had at 4% increase and to take 1%, which has been the rate for other labour negotiations across the province. Mr. Speaker, we haven't taken the slash and burn approach that was taken by the former Liberal government. We haven't taken the same type of Bill 68 approach that was taken by the Conservatives. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we've taken a rational, reasonable approach in order to be able to maintain services to the people of this province.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the real and accurate number is $1.7 billion that the Minister of Finance has added to the debt of this province, Mr. Speaker. The Premier continues to quote $1.4 billion, Mr. Speaker. That is a number that the government is using to mislead Nova Scotians so that they can increase the HST, Mr. Speaker, so they can continue to tax and spend their way to re-election. The Finance Minister has manipulated his projections, hoping that Nova Scotians would be silent while they continue to pay more as they increase 1,400 user fees the week before. Mr. Speaker, the NDP's plan is very clear. Manipulate data, present fictional forecast, tax Nova Scotians into submission, all the while they continue to tax and spend their way, Mr. Speaker, to re-election. My question to the Premier, when will the Premier come clean and present Nova Scotians with the real picture, financial picture that our province is faced with?
Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I've said before, the real picture is that personal income tax in this province will be lower for people this year as a result of an increase in the personal exemption. Small business tax is going down. There was a surplus last year for only the 7th time in 50 years, and estimates of expenses were lower the 2nd year in a row, the first time in 23 years. Is that enough for the Leader of the Opposition?
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the NDP government once again reached into the pockets of Nova Scotians last week with the decision to hike 1,400 user fees by 2%. The nickel and dime party has failed to provide any justification for the fee increases and has been unable to show us the exact cost for every input into each of these fees. User fees that generate anything more than cost recovery for government are not user fees at all. They're taxes on Nova Scotians. My question to the Minister of Finance. You claim these increases reflect the cost of rising inflation. So what input costs, person hours, materials, etc., have actually increased, and by how much?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to confirm to the House today that all the requirements of the Fees Act have been followed. All necessary notices have been filed. The notices were filed on the same day that the order in Council was published. I think the real question here, Mr. Speaker, is it the position of the Liberal Party that the increase in costs of government should be put on the general tax base, or do they share our view, which is that the people using the services should pay for them?
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Well, the reality is, Mr. Speaker, that they have placed an extra burden on the user fees, more than the cost of delivery. And in April 2009 edition of the Chronicle Herald, speaking on the issue of user fee increases, the then leader of the opposition NDP, the current premier, said he hadn't seen any explanation for the increases and is quoted as saying, the cost of the individual service might not have gone up. In fact, it's possible it may have gone down, so it's a tax. Mr. Speaker, civil servants have agreed to only a 1% wage increase, yet a GED certificate has been hiked by 2%. This sounds like a tax to Nova Scotians, and the Finance Minister did what he knows best. He hiked yet another tax. The NDP making life more expensive for Nova Scotia families. My question to the Minister, will he tell Nova Scotians the exact cost to produce a GED certificate, how much it went up, and why?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I notice the member opposite is very carefully evading the real question here. And that question is that when you have something like a GED certificate, Mr. Speaker, should the cost of that be paid for out of the general tax base so that everybody pays for it, or should it be paid for by the person who's actually receiving the GED certificate, Mr. Speaker? In an ideal world, there would be no user fees, there would be no taxes. We would be able to offer a first-class healthcare system, a first-class education system at no cost to anybody, Mr. Speaker. But in the real world, where we do all live, there are costs, Mr. Speaker. And for those matters, Mr. Speaker, we decided that it was better for the cost to be borne by the people actually using the service rather than doing what the Liberals would do, which is add the cost to the general tax base.
The Honourable Member for Kings West. On your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We had expected this Finance Minister would do a comprehensive tax review and he'd know exactly where to place taxes in this province. Mr. Speaker, only 2 years ago, the Premier stood in this House and said, I quote, they call them user fees, but they're taxes. That's what they are, end of quote. Yet on Friday afternoon, outside of the House, with no debate, and while the federal government was about to fall on a non-confidence vote, he sent notice that the NDP was going to make life more expensive for Nova Scotians and hike 1,400 fees. Most disappointing is that no one over on that side of the House can tell Nova Scotians exactly how much it costs to deliver any of these services. My question to the Finance Minister, will you table in the House today how much each fee costs to deliver, the breakdown of these costs, and how much each input increase, or do you expect us to trust you?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said in a previous answer, all required notices have been filed. There is another point the member made that I do want to address, Mr. Speaker, and that is the timing of the release. Now, the order in Council was signed at about noon on the particular day to which the member refers, and the government news release went out within the following 2 hours. It is disrespectful to Her Honour the Lieutenant Governor to notify the public, Mr. Speaker, before the order in Council is signed. Now, Mr. Speaker, they may
order, order, please. Order. 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 Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Finance has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is an absolute convention of government that government news releases do not go out before the order in Council is signed by Her Honour the Lieutenant Governor. They may not respect that tradition, but we do.
The Honourable Member for Inverness.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Finance. Now, a year ago, he said we will reduce the civil service by 10% by 2013. At the time, estimates showed that there were 10,813 civil service positions. So he was promising to reduce about 1,000 positions. How did the minister manage to reduce the number of positions by about 650 people in the past fiscal year just ended?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I refer that to the Minister for the Public Service Commission.
The Honourable Minister of the Public Service Commission.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they weren't reduced. Mr. Speaker, if they would take the time and read the documents that was presented to them, they'd realize what the actual numbers are. Do the actuals, not the estimates. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Inverness, on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Order. The honourable member for Inverness on your first supplementary, please.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the minister has raised that point. And if the Liberals would please be quiet and share the House with other members, we'd be able to conduct question period. Now,
Order. The honourable member for Inverness on your first supplementary, please.
Mr. Speaker, it'd be nice if the Liberals would let the voice from Inverness speak in this House. The point I'm trying to make today, Mr. Speaker, is this government's numbers are all over the place. 1 minute they're up, the next minute they're down. Now, their numbers showed they were decreasing the FTE count, and the numbers are up and down much like their surplus they reported the other night. There was about a $700 million difference. Now, this year, it's indicated within the estimates that the positions are up by about 600. This would indicate no progress on the government's commitment. Can the minister provide this House with some reassurance that he is on track with the government's commitment?
Order, please. Questions about the budget are not allowed, so I would ask the honourable member to rise and on his third supplementary, on his final supplementary.
Speaker, those are the numbers, and the numbers don't lie.
Please, order, please. I'm sorry, but the Premier doesn't tell the Speaker anything in this legislature. The Premier does not tell this Speaker anything. If you don't like it, there's the door. You don't like it, there's the door. The honourable member for Inverness has the floor.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'll move to my third question. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, a couple of weeks ago, the Public Service Commission told us at public accounts that approximately 600 people leave government each year on their own accord, through retirements, through taking a job elsewhere. So none of these people are actually hurt by lost employment. Now, the minister has said that his government can operate a civil service with 1,000 fewer people by 2013. The numbers show that his government has made no progress towards that commitment. When will the minister give Nova Scotians something more than words? And how about some numbers, Mr. Speaker, where estimates actually match actuals to show that they're doing something about reducing the cost of government?
The Honourable Minister of the Public Service Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll rather wait till tomorrow. I'll correct myself today. I should have used estimates instead of actuals, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize. But it's in the budget documents. And if you want to read them, they're there. It's clearly, it started off with 10,935, going to 10,813, and down to 10,700.
Order, please. It's in the budget, please. I'd ask the honourable member to sit down. Thank you. The honourable member for Colchester North, please. The honourable member for Colchester North, please.
You're not going to tell me to sit down, are you? Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Minister of Education. Reading Recovery is a highly structured, research-based program designed to assist early readers. The early intervention program was introduced into schools in Nova Scotia with the support of the Department of Education in 1995. It has proven to be a huge success in the public schools. So my question to the minister is this: will the minister share with classroom teachers and parents and all members of this House who advised that Reading Recovery should be discontinued?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you very much for the question. This was a budget item that was put on the table along with many other things for me to consider when we were building the budget. And even though it ended up in a budget decision, it was at advice from different experts in the field that it would be much better to be able to offer a program that was more encompassing, more flexible, and more equitable. So even though it ended up in the budget, the decision is actually so that we can meet the needs of more of our children in the province, and making sure that we catch them earlier and support them as they travel through their school.
The honourable member for Colchester North on your first supplementary, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm interested to hear the minister say that it was a budget item. I'm also interested to hear that originally it was a $7 million item that was going to be a savings to the province. They're now talking the new program will be $5 million. That's a $2 million difference, and in a huge education budget, what is $2 million when the lives and the progress of kids are online? So my question to the minister is this. What experts, who were the experts who did give the minister that advice?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. In all due respect, it is that is a question that I don't feel that I should be answering in terms of the information that was given to me is irrelevant, in that I have a great deep understanding of the program and having the experience of watching children in the program. I have nothing against the program per se, but the problem is it was not equitable, not flexible, very rigid. We were leaving children out, and this government wants to meet the needs of more children. That is the reason why we are changing the program. Mr. Speaker, I would like to be able to finish this. Changing the program so that we're going to have another approach, catching children early and carry them through with the support they need. This program was a piece of literacy. We want to make it a bigger piece to capture more of our children that need support.
The honourable member from Colchester North on your final supplement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know that over 23,000 grade 1 students have benefited from this intense one-on-one early intervention program. In fact, out of 153 reading programs, as the minister would know, research recently in the U.S., reading recovery was identified as the best. So my question to the minister is this. Will the replacement program be able to stand up to the test of being the best out of 153 others?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you very much. One research placed it as number one. There are other research organizations that would not agree with that. So I guess it's depending on which research you're looking at. Reading Recovery is a program that I am not going to argue with, but unfortunately it does not meet the needs of the children that we have. We have more children that are falling outside of what Reading Recovery is able to pick up on. And unfortunately, the evidence that we have in place, 57% of this, provincially, 57% of those children that had Reading Recovery, by the time they made it to grade 3, are not meeting the expectations that we would like for them to have. We need a program that is going to capture more people and is going to be more successful. This is an approach that we are going to be putting in place, the framework, and we'll be, within the coming weeks, we'll be able to share it with Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
The Honourable Leader of the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. As the Minister may know, or actually he may not know, I shouldn't assume, Mr. Speaker, the Atlantic Mayors Conference is meeting in Halifax today. He may not know that because they may not have told him, because I don't think they're speaking to that minister right now, to be honest, Mr. Speaker, after what he did to them a few weeks ago. But they are meeting here in Halifax. Even if he's not there, even if they didn't tell him, I'm sure his ears are burning, because I suspect they're talking about the minister and what he did to our towns and municipalities a few weeks ago. Mr. Speaker, my question is this. In 2009, the minister of that time, the NDP minister, promised and announced a town's task force to deal with the long-term sustainability of our towns. Well, now, Mr. Speaker, in April of 2011, we're still waiting for that town's task force. And so my question to the minister is this. Is this town's task force, which has not yet met on such an important matter, another example of an NDP broken promise, or is he afraid to meet with them after what he did to our towns a few weeks ago?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.